Good evening, everyone. Welcome you all here to the talk session with Nirnith Devireddy. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our guest, Nirnith Devireddy. Nirnith Devireddy is the CEO and founder of In Silico Minds. In Silico Minds accelerate drug development, regulatory approvals via AI modeling and simulation solutions. He is a tech entrepreneur with over a decade of experience. He is the co-founder of Anipanion. It was the world's leading next-gen health and pet care marketplace platform that connects pet parents and veterinarians. His firm was recognized by American Veterinary Medical Association as a leading virtual care platform, growing his companies into multi-billion-dollar organizations that change the world. Is Nirnith's goal and future plan. Outside of entrepreneurship, Nirnith is a big movie buff who loves acting, and he's very interested in politics. Nirnith also volunteered at Blue Cross and Nandi Community Water Service. So, welcome to the talk session.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the kind words, Dr. Uday. And thank you to IEFR organization for having me here today to give this talk. I think there's a lot happening today in the realm of biopharma, where technology is transforming the way that we traditionally approach R&D. So today I'd like to talk about how AI modeling and simulation, or colloquially termed as in silico, works and some of the hype versus reality. So just as a little background about our organization and what we do. So we're In Silico Minds, and we cater across multiple areas in the realm of In Silico. So we offer modeling and simulation services to our customers. There's a few here listed that entail us creating custom developed models from in-house data and helping to simulate out various studies for their drug development process and compliance to launch their drugs. We also leverage AI and ML and build certain tools as well that can help us with the drug discovery life cycle today. We also have bioinformatics and computational chemistry background. So for example, in the world of API development, we can apply some of our computational chemistry approaches to optimize the route of synthesis of an API, for example. We also work with in silico clinical research and in silico trials. And this is through our exclusive partner, as you can see here, called In Silico Trials from Europe. They're one of the leading companies with a biosimulation platform, which I'll talk about them shortly. But In Silico Trials, in a nutshell, is being able to virtually simulate clinical trials and also be able to create adaptive trial designs based on the results. We also offer domain advisory and consultancy. So we work with a lot of pharma companies to define their roadmap for implementing these technologies, as well as the apt product areas that they're working on where they would be best suited for. And then we also allow for staff augmentation in the case that companies want to scale their technology teams that are working on similar work areas like this. We work across a lot of products, so be it orals, non-orals, complex generics like long-acting injectables, biologics and biosimilars, medical devices, and APIs as well. And we've engaged with the regulatory agencies in the sense that this in silico driven evidence or computational evidence is used to support dossier submissions as a part of getting approvals for these drugs. And so we've interacted with some of the key ones globally in terms of helping to support dossier submissions with this in silico evidence and getting bio waivers or approvals for that said data. So our team has 20 plus years of collective experience in modeling and simulation across global pharma, and they've also submitted 25 plus dossier submissions to regulatory bodies, and again, for in silico evidence. We're also a part of the Avicenna Alliance, which is actually a great alliance based out of Europe, which is focused on predictive medicine and all things in silico. So they have a task force that are set up to promote the usage of these technologies globally. And they also have great relationships with the regulatory bodies like that in FDA and EMA to also promote the regulations around the usage of this. So real quick on our partner company In Silico Trials. They're a leading biosimulation platform. Think of them as the Spotify of the modeling world and simulation world today. So they take through their 70 plus scientific collaboration network. So this is the network of many organizations such as from esteemed academia as well as regulatory bodies, where they take validated models and create a product around it that can be deployed at pharma companies and used in an out-of-the-box solution. They work across many multiple therapeutic areas, and they also have won many awards with their work in the in silico world, many publications as well. And one of the key value adds that they've added to the in silico landscape today. So there's practices of GXP like GLP and GCP, so good laboratory practice and good clinical practice that is followed to the T today in our traditional R&D processes for drug development. Now, there's something called good simulation practice, which I'll get into in a oncoming slide here. But think of this as the standardization for the best practices for these types of in silico technologies. So real quick, I wanted to give you a deep dive into what are the challenges or problems that we're facing today. So when it comes to the discovery of new drugs, it's a very costly affair, a very time-consuming affair. It costs a lot of money, a lot of time, and there's a very low probability of success. Only 5% are approved by regulators. So we're seeing that technology and specifically the use of in silico, so AI, as well as computational modeling and simulation techniques in conjunction help dramatically increase the probability of success and decrease the time and cost with finding new drugs. We also see when it comes to generics that, as you may know, generics is a very increasingly competitive field in terms of pharmaceutical development. In India alone, there's a multitude of generics players, and quite often they may be working on similar drugs where they time to market is a critical use to them. So time to market is critical, and so
Excuse me, Bobby, just
exclusivity.
one second.
Yeah.
I think people, the audience, can you please mute yourself? There is some background, so thank you. Sorry.
It's coming from somebody named Bhakti.
Great. I think it's
Bhakti, you got to mute yourself, please. Or you can, come back when you are finished talking with whoever. So,
okay. I think noise is done, so I'll continue here. So yeah, so I think some of the problems or challenges that generic companies are facing today is that as they're competing on similar drug products that they're trying to uh, replicate from innovator companies, time to market is very critical. So being first to market gives them a huge advantage in terms of sales and increasing their value or investment into developing that generic drug. Also, R&D prioritization is critical. I mean, there's only so many dollars, and the right choices need to be made in terms of investing into the right programs with high probability of successes. So in silico helps dramatically in this area in terms of allowing for better internal decision making and prioritizing which programs would have higher probabilities of success in terms of reaching the finish line. And then regulatory hurdles or challenges. So often regulatory compliance or proving bioequivalence in generic products is very important and critical to getting approvals to market. So in silico can dramatically help with this whole process in terms of supporting dossier submissions with in silico data, that can help prove the safety and efficacy of the drugs in question. Finally, APIs. So the development of APIs, we have a large number of API developers here in India, over 3,000 API factories. So I think some of the challenges that they faced include high cost for using API materials in lab to do the traditional approaches. Of course, infrastructure costs, lab time, so taking a lot of time in lab and using trial and error type approaches. And then, of course, finding what is the most optimal or cost-effective route. And then, of course, a environmental element that's there to this. So again, In Silico is beautiful that it can address all of these problems by helping us use computational chemistry approaches, including AI and quantum mechanics involved in those approaches to help, again, reduce all of these that you see here and find the optimal route of synthesis for an API. So before we get deeper into the presentation, I really wanted to give a sort of background and definitions into some of the words that tend to be thrown around as buzzwords. And so it's very important for us to take a step back and understand how this language plays into the strategy. So in silico is defined as an overarching term that encompasses AI, ML, Gen AI, and computational modeling and simulation. So you can think of in vitro, in vivo, and now we have in silico, which encompasses all things computationally done as opposed to a traditional R&D method for any sort of biopharma development. Now, we take a look at the definition of computational modeling and simulation, or CMS for short. So this has been around for decades now. It's now getting a lot more spotlight because of things like ChatGPT coming in and AI becoming a crucial buzzword and industry driver today for technology adoption. So computational modeling and simulation is based on mathematical principles and physical or physiological principles. And these are models that are quantitatively created to forecast outcomes based on these mathematical algorithms and data analysis. This has been applied in many industries, even well before the drug industry. For example, in aerospace and testing of airplanes, as well as in power with testing of nuclear power plants. Now, AI, which is a hot word, especially after ChatGPT has become a commercial success globally, where artificial intelligence is the simulation of human intelligence via machines or computer systems. And so this is where we actually can take data, and so it's combined with machine learning, where we take data and we can create a algorithm or program that can mimic intelligence and give us intelligent output that can process that data and come to a formulated conclusion or analysis based on that. So AI and ML go hand in hand, where ML is essentially a subset of artificial intelligence, and it's how these algorithms or models, AI models, are developed, where it allows for decisions based on data to be explicitly programmed, and the machine can then learn on these patterns or techniques. Just like how you teach a baby, A is for apple, B is for ball. It's repetition over and over again so that the baby understands that A is for apple. And so it's similarly how artificial intelligence is trained today. And then finally, we come to generative AI, or Gen AI for short. So this is your ChatGPT. This is where the algorithms or AI models that are underlying are designed in a way to generate new data instances. So this is sort of taking a lot of underlying patterns and structures and data and then creating something new or synthetic data that is similar to the original data set. So large language models, LMMs, large multimodal models, and GANs are all examples of generative AI. And to put it into layman's terms, ChatGPT today, which is a tool that I'm sure majority of the folks on this call have used, is a form of generative AI. So real quick, visually, you can see that in silico is the overarching term, and how computational modeling and simulation and AI are coupled as in silico approaches that can be applied. Some AI and ML is computational modeling and simulation, but not all computational modeling and simulation is AI and ML. And Gen AI is an emerging area, which is time is to tell how this can help transform our industry. So before we get into some of the deep dive of how these technologies work and how AI is being applied, I'd like to discuss about the in silico regulatory landscape overall, globally, and how this is accelerating the adoption of these technologies across pharma companies globally. So it's a very, very promising message that the regulatory bodies are sharing with us. So you can see here visually on a map, many agencies, with the FDA leading the charge, are quite open to computational modeling and simulation. So again, this is the quantitative approach or mechanistic modeling approach that can be used computationally to create in silico data that can support regulatory compliance. And a lot of agencies, for example, FDA has been accepting this form of data well back in early 2010. And there are other agencies, be it Brazil or Australia, that are very forward-thinking and have guidelines around the acceptance of this. Some work that we've done also has been accepted in these regulatory agencies. Canada is moving forward. China, Japan, South Korea, Saudi Arabia, Germany. So these are all areas that regulatory agencies are very well equipped to handle in silico data. Now, if you can see, there's a question mark on India, and I'll get into that shortly. But I'd like to look at the FDA real quick. So the FDA is really maverick. They've been leading the charge for this for the past decade, where they accept computational modeling and simulation. So they even have a very great publication on the successes and opportunities in modeling and simulation. I highly encourage everyone to take a look and read through this to gain a better understanding of how this can be applied. And I mean, it's growing very fast. There's the FDA Modernization Act 2.0, which was signed in December, a couple of Decembers ago, where essentially they're changing the whole preclinical to non-clinical, where they're trying to move away from animal testing and to replace that with other methods like computational modeling and simulation. So you can still test in animal models virtually and understand the safety and efficacy of a drug. There's been a lot of growth as well on AI legislation, now that AI is creeping in, as you saw from the definitions we went through earlier, where AI is creeping into how computational modeling and simulation can be done, and how certain AI models can do justice in terms of developing in silico evidence to back regulatory filings. There's also something called the MIE program and MIDD program that the FDA has launched. These are programs that encourage IND and ANDA applicants from industry that are working on discovery or that are working on generics that want to launch in the US can have a meeting preemptively to understand what in silico approaches would best suit their program, and any thoughts that they had around those approaches or how they'd like to implement it, and get a pre-approval or a go-ahead for having the go-ahead to implement those technologies and have those data potentially be acceptable from a regulatory compliance perspective. So lots happening. Just yesterday, I mean, it's happening so fast. I had to post this on top of this, but the CDER, which is a division within the FDA, established a new Quantitative Medicine Center of Excellence, or QMCOE. Now, this center focuses purely on computational modeling and simulation and the growth of that. So great job that the FDA is doing. They're setting a world example. And I think that leads us into our next slide here. This is just a visual chart of all the areas. And of course, I'm sure this will be updated where the new organization that the FDA created is added into this. But these are some of all the modeling areas that the FDA works on or has reviewers or people in place. They have these tools already. For example, the industry tools that are most used, computational modeling and simulation. So they have people in place that can assess the type of data we submit to them, and then also replicate that data in their tools. Now, what about the CDSCO and DTGI? So I think that's something where we still need to make some strides here in our country in India. As of right now, in June of 2023, India did pass a law where they were able to ban animal testing, or at least propose an amendment to do that in the Clinical Trials Act. They also mentioned very specifically that they'd like to use other non-animal methods like computational modeling and simulation, organ on chip, just to name a few. But implementation is key. And without the regulatory agency sort of buying in to this or being able to put across guidelines or have reviewers in place at the CDSCO, DCGI level, it's very hard then to accept this type of in silico evidence and or grant regulatory compliance based on it. So we're working actively on this, and this is an initiative that's industry-wide, it's academic-wide, and then it takes a combination of all three and the regulator having a conversation to help push this forward. But we do have the FDA to learn from, and I think there's some very great guidelines that can be followed to shorten this process. Finally, I'd like to touch upon this book, which I highly encourage everybody on the call to download. It's called by the CEO of In Silico Trials, our exclusive partner company, along with 130 other research collaborators and from university and industry. The FDA wrote the foreword for this book, and so it's a leading guide where all the principles in terms of best practices for computational modeling and simulation are laid out. So it's a great read and highly recommend that everybody on this call check this out. So just to ask a question, and you guys can keep this answer in your mind, and I'll give you a second to think it over. But my question today to the folks on this call is, can AI discover a new drug? And so the answer is we will have to wait and see, but we are very close. And there are a lot of positive signs, which I'll cover in our presentation today, which are forecasting that AI will be an undeniable force in accelerating and finding the right molecules in drug discovery. Now, second question I have is, can in silico hyper-accelerate drug development and approvals? And I think remember back to our slides about the definition of what is in silico and what it consists of. But yes, it can. So it can absolutely, and this is an absolute yes, it can help with internal R&D decision-making and regulatory compliance. So be it computational modeling and simulation approaches or AI-driven approaches, it can help in some sense or manner, whether it be internal decision-making or regulatory compliance. So now getting into the science or the tech behind it, models exist on a spectrum from data-driven to mechanistic. And if you get them to work well together, so it's a combination, we can do powerful things. So data models, in short, are based off of statistics and correlation. So they're based on existing data, And so this includes patterns, clusters, relationships, for example, drug-to-drug interactions, and they can make predictions based on what has already been observed. Now, mechanistic models are causality-based models, so they're built on a cause and effect understanding. They quantify the stage of knowledge, and they can make predictions prior to what we build in. So where data is very scarce, we don't have much data for the model, or it's hard to generate or non-existent, we can augment data from the physical world. So be it like biology-based or
Vaishnavi.
chemistry, undeniable force in accelerating and finding the right molecules in drug discovery. Now, second question I have is, can in silico hyper-accelerate drug development and approvals? And I think remember back to our slides about the definition of what is in silico and what it consists of. But yes, it can. So it can absolutely, and this is an absolute yes, it can help with internal R&D decision-making and regulatory compliance. So be it computational modeling and simulation approaches or AI-driven approaches, it can help in some sense or manner, whether it be internal decision-making or regulatory compliance. So now getting into the science or the tech behind it, models exist on a spectrum from data-driven to mechanistic. And if you get them to work well together, so it's a combination, we can do powerful things. So data models, in short, are based off of statistics and correlation. So they're based on existing data.
Yeah. Thank you,
Okay.
Bobby. Go ahead, please.
Great. So again, so mechanistic models are based on physics or physics-based models. They can be on the physiology, the mechanics, the chemistry. So here in the right, you can see that the top model represents a model of a heart, like an image-based model that articulates. So this AI model articulates where the regions of the heart are. Now down here, what you see is actually a mechanistic model, which is a little bit more complex, where it captures the cause and effects. So it shows a physics-based model, which drives also an image-based model, where it shows how the flow of the drug can affect the chambers in the heart. So this is how models can then come together to create an accurate representation or picture for us to simulate or model safety, efficacy, and other scenarios that are crucial to the drug development process today. So I'd like to touch real quick, since we did talk a little bit about generics before we get into discovery, about how modeling and simulation can support generic pharma companies today. So as mentioned, bio waivers are grantable, where you can get waivers based on, let's say, for example, lower strength to higher strength, or certain bio waivers on certain populations that you would need to test safety and efficacy in. And these are granted by regulatory agencies where they review the in silico data and then deem viable if this can be supportable for granting a bio waiver. Our team has definitely worked on many of those, and it is a reality in today's regulatory landscape. Now, when it comes to population PK or virtual bioequivalence, this is where we're trying to prove that the copycat drug is bioequivalent to the innovator drug. And we also can test this computationally. We can test it through various scenarios, as well as in virtual populations, be it infant or geriatric. So again, it's a powerful way to reduce trial and error and prove virtual bioequivalence in computational methods. Then there's PBPK, which stands for physiologically based pharmacokinetic modeling. This type of modeling is a mechanistic model, so it takes into the account the organs, for example, stomach or the, and then of course, how the physics reacts with the pharmacokinetics to understand how the drug is reacting, could be the ADME, within this model, the model of the physiologically based. And manufacturing is another interesting area where modeling and simulation can be applied. So this is where traditionally, when you're in the R&D setting in lab, and you have a eureka where your drug is working, but you need to scale it up in terms of to the plant level. So the whole tech transfer or scale up can be modeled again using physics-based geometry-based modeling to understand, for example, how the compounds and the synthesis and everything can behave in a giant drum in your manufacturing plant. So this is a powerful way, again, a big challenge to companies where batches get rejected or they have millions and millions of dollars lost due to commercial discrepancies in the batches, in the commercial batches. So this is a really, really powerful tool for helping with these challenges. You can also use In Silico for drug device combinations. So things like inhalers. This here is a nasal inhaler where we can simulate how the drug would release. We can simulate nozzle size, amount of drug that's released, and how it's interacting with the nasal cavity. We can also talk about bioequivalence and how formulation optimization, where rather than having a loop in the lab or the traditional lab where you have to keep testing what is the optimal formulation, you can actually use In Silico to better predict how your formulation is going to work. And then you can tweak it accordingly and then predict that again in Silico, all through n number of simulations, and then find the perfect formulation rather than having to go back and forth in this process. So again, powerful tool. It can help with repurposing programs, so 595(b)(2) to find another indication or to find another purpose for the drug. And then, of course, the dissolution safe space, where you can actually understand computationally what would be the optimal dissolution safe space for this drug. This is just a visual representation. I won't spend too much time on this, but this outlines the traditional approach of generic development and where In Silico can intervene to help throughout the process. So it's a hand-in-hand approach. It doesn't replace, it augments, and it allows us for, again, better internal decision-making and eventually regulatory compliance when you do submit your dossier, where you have a combination of in-house in vitro in vivo data and In Silico data to back your safety and efficacy claims for your drug. Now, I'd like to touch upon the traditional drug discovery and development pipeline today. So as just a quick refresher and background, goes in through discovery and development. And we start off with, of course, target discovery, hit generation, lead identification. Then we go into the lead optimization and the animal models, which we talked about preclinical, which is now more colloquially known as non-clinical due to the FDA Modernization Act. And then the clinical stage, where we have our phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. So as mentioned, this is while this all fits in a slide, this is a very time-consuming process and a very costly affair. And this is also why India has very few NCE programs. And I honestly do foresee or anticipate that In Silico is going to also help dynamically change India in terms of being more forward-thinking and able to have NCE or NBE programs and to actually discover and develop novel drugs. But yeah, again, this is where we can see traditionally how this works. And I'd like to now go into how computational modeling and simulation In Silico and AI all combined are influencing this and reducing this time frame and cost around this whole tedious process. So in the discovery realm, we're seeing that drug repurposing, target identification, bioactivity predictions, and molecular docking all can be done with in silico approaches, which allow us to, again, better understand or shortlist viable candidates before we start pushing it up the pipeline. We also can understand the safety and efficacy elements of it in the non-clinical stage by using these technologies. So we can understand toxicological endpoints, cardiotoxicity, mutagenicity, chemotoxicity. We can understand the ADME, the physical chemical properties. We can leverage AI and ML and quasar approaches, which are used for finding these out. And so this is a great area where there can be heavy reduction in terms of in-lab testing, in vitro and vivo testing, with the supplement of these in silico technologies. And then when we get into the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, again, it's a powerful tool to simulate, because sometimes we're working on therapeutic areas where it's very challenging to find the right clinical patients to be a part of the trial, or it's sensitive patients, or it could be rare orphan diseases. And of course, it's costly affairs to run clinical trials. So technology can be used to mimic and create through validated models and validated data, where we can understand how trials can be simulated in terms of safety, efficacy, dose response, how it would behave in certain populations, in different disease populations. We can understand the disease progression, chance of relapse, and we can simulate this n number of times. So very powerful in how this is transforming the end-to-end cycle today. To get a little bit deeper into AI in specific, we see AI in drug design today. So we can predict the 3D structure of a target protein. I'm sure most of you know about AlphaFold. If not, we will be touching upon that very soon in a slide. AI can help predict the drug-protein interactions. It can be very, very helpful in determining drug activity, as well as understanding overall the de novo drug design based on these AI technologies. It can also help with finding and designing biospecific drug molecules and multi-target drug molecules. AI is also very powerful today in chemical synthesis. So it's able to look through vast amounts of validated data coming from databases like PubChem, for example, where we can now use computational tools or AI-powered tools to predict, for example, a reaction yield, optimize the route of synthesis and the prediction of retrosynthesis pathways, and have a deeper insight when we're designing and synthesizing APIs. We can also use AI for drug repurposing. I mean, this is a great use case, especially when we had gone through the COVID pandemic, and how this was very integral in helping us find or repurpose drugs to help combat the pandemic. So I think this is a huge area, and we definitely see AI helping us drive drug repurposing moving forward. Then there's AI in drug screening. So again, this is about finding out the safety and efficacy of a drug using these technologies. These are connected to validated databases that are accepted, again, by regulatory agencies. So the thing with AI is that it's garbage in, garbage out. So it's very integral that the AI tools that we leverage for our R&D are from validated data sources and validated not only from an industry perspective, but also a regulatory perspective. So we can predict toxicity, toxicological endpoints. We can predict bioactivity, as well as the physiochemical properties. And we can also identify and classify target cells. So again, in a nutshell, these are some areas, as we discussed, in where we're seeing a lot of growth. Now, I'd wanted to talk real quick about AlphaFold. So AlphaFold is a mind-blowing tool. It's developed by company called DeepMind in collaboration with Google. And it allows us to predict a protein 3D structure from its amino acid. And so this is game changing. I mean, this used to take months or years to do, and this can be done now in a weekend. So it's a great, great tool. Highly recommend those on the call to check this out, play with it. It's definitely something that's transforming the way we're working on drug discovery and development today. We talked about toxicity, so the importance of safety and efficacy. So AI-based in silico prediction is totally doable. As mentioned here in diagram A, we have a lot of data, right? And so this is data coming from, for example, Drug Bank or Kemble. So these are all validated databases where we can create powerful models or AI models that can take into account these data and help us understand the toxicity of a drug, be it the cardiotoxicity, chemotoxicity, the mutagenicity, and many other toxicological endpoints. We have a great tool actually in-house that helps do this. And I think it's a very great area where we can heavily reduce lab experimentation, especially in animal models, and we can transition towards computational models. Now, we talked a little bit about the clinical space and how phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, it can be very difficult. So for example, this is a solution that our European partner In Silico Trials has. It's for ALS, neurodegenerative disease. And this tool allows for us to understand the disease progression and then also simulate in synthetic arms the effect of our drug versus the placebo and how that affects in the disease progression of ALS. So this is an online tool where our customers can log in, they can input the following characteristics that they need to define in terms of the trial and the patient cohort. And then we can essentially then simulate using a dynamic Bayesian network algorithm that's proprietary and created by our partner to simulate the virtual ALS patients and see again the outcome based on this virtually created population of ALS population. So powerful stuff. This is transforming the way we traditionally do clinical trials. It allows for better informed clinical trials where we can boost the performance of clinical trials today. So think of it as a way that this data can supplement or augment how we can better design our entry and exit criteria for clinical trials today so that we can have the highest probability of success. And this could even lead to cost savings where our in silico data is telling us that you can be successful in your trial in 80 patients, for example, rather than 100. So powerful stuff. And this is where I foresee that in silico will definitely be a game changer in reducing the time it takes to get a drug approved and on market. Again, a little bit more about the tool. And this can also be done at a patient characteristic level on an individual level. So this is where the robustness of the model is very important, the data that drives this model. So our partner company had trained the data set on over 3,940 ALS patients. So this is, again, all quality data. Remember, garbage in, garbage out. So it requires quality validated data that can help us create powerful models that can help us with this whole process. Now, I remember I asked a question earlier about how AI discovered drugs are faring, and are we there yet? And is it true that AI can discover drugs for us? So as I said, we're very close. It's powerful where the progress that we've made, but here's some organizations, as well as which phase they're in, and the lead indication that they're looking to treat. You can see some folks like In Silico Medicine, where they're treating IPF, and Extensia, where they're treating some inflammatory and autoimmune conditions. But we do see that they are progressing along the clinical trial path, and we hope that very soon we will see an approval, which will definitely bolster the industry forward into a realm where we will not be looking back from. This is a little bit more detail on the actual numbers behind this, which is crazy. But compared to what we talked about, which takes decades for drugs to get to market, if you look at this, it's saying that from discovery to trial, they were able to get the result in 18 months. So that is a drastic decrease in time taken. And we hope that, the success of this candidate works out in the end and they pass their phase 2 and phase 3 trials. But it's looking very promising for IPF. Real quick, I think we touched upon this, but AI is playing a role in terms of computational chemistry in how AI is helping with the API development today. So here are a few examples of, again, being able to identify the optimal vendors, be it region or domestic or international, based on cost. We can also understand the most optimal route of synthesis, or perform retrosynthesis accordingly using tools, validated tools. We can also understand reaction pathways, yield prediction, impurity prediction, so nitrosamines, for example. So understanding what would be the likelihood of certain impurities forming, and also potential mitigation strategies that can be built in to our development processes to mitigate that. Again, looking from a time perspective, the above is the traditional pathway for developing of API. So you can see that it's in weeks and months. And then we see here how In Silico can help play a part, reducing it heavily, again, down into weeks and days in terms of some of these processes. So powerful stuff, again, which goes hand in hand with the traditional approach. So we're not replacing, we're informing, or better, In Silico informed evidence in the traditional process, which then can be validated throughout this process, in vitro or in vivo. So now we're finally getting to Gen A. So this is, again, is your Chat GPT. This is the coolest kid on the block, where people are now screaming this on top of the roof. But again, there has been a lot that's happened in computational modeling and simulation and AI as we've gone through. And we're just now getting into generative AI and how this can help transform life sciences. So as you can see here from this McKinsey report, we see a lot of growth in research and early discovery, where eventually AI can generate a molecule or a compound based on what therapeutic area we want to target. So we're not yet there, but we're working towards that. And that's, again, the integrity of the data that we have, the validation of that data is all going to help build towards this. Then we can also use this for a clinical trial, as we talked about, so clinical development, as well as other areas of the pharma processes today, be it operations or the commercial element of it as well. So from operational perspective, AI can help transform the industry, not just from a R&D perspective. Here's some tools that are out there today in the Gen AI world. So there's some discovery tools out there. You can see In Silico Medicine listed in there. There's also synthetic data sets that can be generated These can then further be used to custom built models or develop models. There's also other areas where we're seeing generative AI come up, like we have ChatGPT, but now we have BioGPT, which can help with general research. For example, you have an API, you want to understand its physicochemical properties or its pharmacokinetic properties of a certain drug. These can all now be searched, like how we search in ChatGPT. They're connected to validated databases and like PubMed, other public domain data of the global consortium of research to get us the answers. But the idea here today is that, where can I start and what technology should I start to learn? And so I've broken it down into three buckets in terms of the three areas, as we talked about, that all come under In Silico. First area would be computational modeling and simulation. So making sure that, hey, learning softwares like PKSim, Certara, NonMem, Phoenix WinLonan, GastroPlus, these all allow us to computationally model and simulate through mathematical or quantitative-based models or mechanistic models, where we can create using in vivo, in vitro data, using in-house data, validate that, predict based on the models that we develop, and then further supplement our internal decision making or regulatory compliance. Now, when we look in the AI/ML realm, we can do Reaxys, AlphaFold, Schrodinger. These are some areas which I think that you can sort of check out, get your hands dirty. Reaxys, for example, helps with computational chemistry. It can help with us in terms of finding the optimal route of synthesis, as we had discussed for API development. And then finally, generative AI, which is BioGPT. Play around with that because it's definitely a step further from ChatGPT, where we can ask it a little bit more specific questions and understand how it can respond to us from a more scientific level, or understanding and parsing through a lot of scientific published data to give us an answer. And with that, I'm coming to the end here, but I just like to leave you guys with this quote. It's been used across all industries, so it's apt for us here as well in pharma and life sciences. But AI won't replace R&D scientists, but R&D scientists using AI will. So with that, I'll close this. Please follow us on LinkedIn to actively keep up to date with what we are doing in the space of In Silico. Feel free to email us if you have any questions, or check out our website to learn more details. And I'll open it up real quick here for questions or Q&A. But thank you all, and appreciate giving this talk today.
Thank you, Bobby. Brilliant presentation and very well articulated.
About drug discovery, I just want to know what will humans do when AI can perform true cognitive tasks?
Sure. So
and one more sub-question I have, not a sub-question. What ethical consideration should be taken into account when developing and deploying AI?
Absolutely. So those are great questions. And so let me answer the first one, and I'll get to the second one. So the first one is that AI is considered in our industry assisted intelligence, in my opinion, right? So it's more so having the R&D scientists still there. I mean, there's some level of domain expertise that's required to understand the underlying data, to understand the mechanics and the principles, and essentially the pharmacology of it. But it's combined with the domain expert and the model and the usage of the model, the AI model, which allows us to come up with the right output, which is, okay, this candidate is good, or this candidate is not good, and this is going to have a higher probability of success when I'm actually testing it out in lab. So it's not meant to be a replacement just yet. It's more meant to be an assisted approach in better internal decision making. And coming to the second question on the ethical considerations, it's a great question. As I talked about earlier, it's about garbage in, garbage out. So when we're developing an AI model, there's concepts like explainable AI, or gray box approach rather than black box approach, where essentially models need to be validated, which is very important, which means the data that you're using for the models or to build these AI models can then be further validated in an actual lab setting or an in vitro or in vivo or setting. So with these items in line, the ethical consideration of it is okay, in the sense that you're developing robust sound models that are a valid form of supporting your evidence for safety and efficacy. Now, when it comes to the actual data that builds the models, I think one of the challenges globally is that there's always been a sort of uh, a, uh, 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 a taboo to use patient data, because patient data belongs to the patient, but there are ways around it now where we can anonymize data, we can protect the patient, there's patient consent. So all the data that's used to build the models should be coming from patients that have accepted it to do so. It's coming from, for example, academic institutes that have access to large studies, large patient groups, that have already opted in. And so this data is then again powerful in covering our basis in terms of it's ethical data, it's validated data, it's coming from reliable sources. And so that's very, very key when we're developing or using AI models today.
Yep. Excellent
Thank you
question,
so much, sir.
Sharanya.
It
Yeah.
was a nice talk.
Anybody else have a question?
Yeah. Hi, Bobby Reddy. This is Deepika. I just want to know how robust is the validation data that you use for each of the prediction models? That's the first question. And then, is there a crosstalk or overlap of data across different drugs and different diseases, like the prediction models? Is there any interference or error or overlap of data?
Great questions. So the first question is that absolutely. I can see that you were talking about the reliability and the accuracy and the validation of the models. So
Yes.
the idea here is that it's a combination of taking public data and in-house data from the organization to validate that model. So the model is at a base level, and then we further augment that with in-house data and with public domain data to ensure that we're in line with the expected results or in line with what we should be seeing, be it good results or bad results. And so I think that's very important. And that's important not only from an internal decision-making perspective, but also from the regulatory compliance. Because what ends up happening is that when we use these approaches, be it computational modeling or simulation or AI, the reviewers will take a look at your data, but they don't just look at your data. They look at the whole story. So they look at how is the model developed, what inputs or data were used, how did you validate the model? So be it in an in vitro study or against, let's say, certain in vivo, in vitro data that you already have in-house. And then you come up with a sort of confidence interval for your model and a reliability or predictability confidence interval for it. And so all this together becomes the story of how you use in silico, and then this is submitted to the FDA or any regulatory agency that'll take a look at it. So this is where it's used. Now, more so like an early discovery, it's more so again validated based on public domain data. So this is the PubMeds and PubChems and all the validated data sources out there. Now, some AI models are further trained on, let's say, industry-specific data or proprietary data or data from uh, academic institutes, but nonetheless, it's all validated again against that data. And then I think the second question is that if we do actually see any overlaps, it's very hard because we apply these models in a very specific use case. So it's, let's say, okay, I want to understand the, cardiotoxicity of this specific molecular compound. So it's a very specific question of interest that we're answering, and the model depends on the inputs of that specific question, and then it will answer that specific question based on what you're actually looking to look at. So there's no overlap per se. There's the use of models in multiple areas to answer multiple questions, where there's varying degrees of input, but it's more so a tool, an assisted tool, not necessarily something that can provide alternative information to what you're getting traditionally.
So first of all, Bobby, brilliantly articulated, and obviously you're a good speaker. So I want to relate to one anecdote. I used to work for Park Davis Pfizer, and I was part of the team that did the Lipitor atorvastatin discovery. And I mean, when I hear you talking, this was back in the 90s. We didn't even work with an isolated drug. We took liver homogenate because we didn't have the means to isolate the enzyme, which was the target for the statin. So we worked with that, did a lot of work, probably 10 times more work than AI would today ask us to do, and then prayed to God, literally prayed to God that it's going to succeed in humans. So it was a hit and miss. And I think the biggest impact AI is going to have is on that hit and miss factor. Even the Pfizers and the Mercks and all till today, when they hand over the drug from the non-clinical team to the clinical team, there's a prayer on your lips. And I think that black box is where I believe, and that's the reason I signed up to, be part of you guys, is that I think that is the game changer to me. So, I would keep your eyes open for those stories where people were successfully able to say that this is definitely going to work. So I think that's really the big game changer. So very exciting. The other thing I wanted to say, it's really a question. One of the things that India has to offer, especially in oncology, because we're working on an oncology program with another company, is the
Right.
availability of naive patients. In the world, there's not enough naive patients who have never been exposed to a chemotherapeutic agent that you can test your drugs on. So India has that naive population in perhaps many diseases. Do you believe that capturing that database and that data set of how this Indian population will add a lot, because the numbers, right? The numbers of patients who are there, you will never find it anywhere else. So do you think that's a huge value add that you are here and will have access to that information?
So two parts to answer that question. I want to be optimistic, but then at the same time also got to look at the cons of it too. So as we talked about, it's garbage in, garbage out. As of right now, a lot of models are built on European or US data as a base, because of the, let's say, accuracy or reliability in the collection of that data. Now, when we come to India, yes, there are a lot of organizations that have valid data sources that are well kept, and that can be beautiful sources for creating and developing models based on the vast access of different types of patients with different types of diseases, as you mentioned, are available here. Now, the other element to consider, though, is that the integrity of the data. So, I know, for example, a lot of clinical trials still, on site have, for example, paper recordings of the trial in patients. So it's something that the responsibility of the data lies throughout the whole value chain, like definitely down at the ground level between the patient and the clinician, the clinical trial site managers, the whole 9 yards. Everybody needs to be integral and accurate about the data and data recording and the data reliability. And if that's all there and sound, then absolutely, I think we can use the vast amounts of data that we have here to develop models.
So, hello, Bobby. Nice to hear you, actually. So, very fantastic presentation and very thoughtful process, actually. So, we really did not work on AI for the biology as a company, but it is so much to learn from you, actually. So, considering, besides the advantages of this AI in the drug discovery, so I have been seeing some companies, and a few companies, at least, so where they have screened almost 3,000 molecules using AI for one indication, and they've identified them, so considering them to be potential molecules. But when they actually started validating in the in vitro, in vivo studies, they couldn't even get even a single molecule passing through this preclinical out of those 3,000.
Right.
So in such scenario, like what could be the wrong there actually? So after investing of so much into that,
Again, so there's a combination, Gopi, on this, and it's a two-pronged effort, right? So it's one, it could be that they were using unreliable model or not the right models that can be out there to do this. It may be a tool, or they may have done it wrong. And the second area to consider in terms of the potential failure is the actual resources that are going into analyzing the data, structuring the model, reviewing the output, and then coming to the decision making based on what the data is saying. So that also requires a certain level of somebody with the knowledge, not just of the computational part, but also the scientific part. So it's a manuring of both, essentially. So it could be a combination of any of these, Gopi. But again, what could have been done as well is this whole concept of end-to-end, where, okay, now that you've streamlined those compounds, you can, for example, or molecule, you can, for example, with the SMILE structure, we have a tool for drug safety cardiac suite. It uses a model that comes from the FDA and a few other models and combined to give it a higher level of accuracy. And you can enter the SMILE structure and then understand the cardiotoxicity of that drug and the potential tertiary genetic risk. So it's then something where it's like, well, before you even go back into doing those 10 molecules in lab again, and then, seeing that, oh, in safety and efficacy, it's not working in the non-clinical, you can do through that computationally as well, again. And I think that's where somebody that's an end-to-end provider that understands the whole in silico value chain, and that can essentially handhold somebody through each step of the development process, discovery and development process, are in better position to help the client succeed. So that would be what we're doing with a lot of our customers. And I think that's where we see the true value. It's a combination of technology and resource.
Yeah, totally excellent. So in every step, you need to have one quality check, whether to go further or not. So
absolutely, absolutely.
There's one question in the chat box. It says, could you please share any general comments regarding the impact of AI in the competitive landscape of drug development?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I talked a little bit on this, but I mean, there's a lot of competition in generics, of course. And then, of course, there are, let's say, only so many molecules, or, only so many therapeutic areas where a lot of business interest or efforts globally are being put into, be it oncology or sort of neurodegenerative diseases like ALS. So I think it's very impactful because it can be the differentiator for company A versus company B in being able to have a leg ahead or a faster time to market, or a less cost associated with their program because they're making the right decisions faster, as Dr. Uday had said back in the day, versus what can be done now. And so I think those that use AI, and not just AI, but also anything in silico, so even computational modeling and simulation, can dramatically decrease their costs and time, and then and make better decision making.
And thank you. I think we'll stop taking the questions. I just want to inform you guys that IEFR, if you want to learn more, please visit the IEFR LinkedIn page.
Hello, good evening to all. On behalf of Indira and Eshwar Foundation for Research, I would like to present a vote of thanks for everyone. A special thanks to our guest, Mr. Nirnith Devireddy, for taking the time to share his invaluable experience and insight on the fascinating and critical topic of AI and drug discovery. His expertise and willingness to engage with us have greatly enriched our understanding of this complex subject. His contribution has helped us advance our knowledge and approach in this field. Thank you, sir, for your generous and impactful participation, which has made this meeting possible. I extend my sincere gratitude to our mentor, Dr. Uday Saxena, founder of IEFR, for constant guidance and motivation. I would like to thank Dr. Gopi Kadiala, CEO of Kintox Biotech, for consistently supporting us. I want to thank the audience for asking thoughtful questions, and I hope the session was useful. Once again, thank you everyone for joining us in the meeting today.
Thank you very much, Kriti. That was very nice. Thank you. Yeah.
You.
All right,
Thank
Bobby,
you.
thank you so much. I mean, it was an eye-opener for everybody, and we'd like to have you again, probably in a year, 6 months to a year time. And, I'm pretty sure the world of AI would have changed you by then. So look
Yes,
forward
hopefully
to.
we have one that's been approved by then.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for your time. Yeah.